The morning air bit at my cheeks as I rounded the last corner of Elmwood Drive. Same route, same rhythm, same breath that reminded me I was still alive. At 62, routine wasn't boredom, it was armor. I carried a half-empty water bottle, sweat cooling against the old track jacket I'd owned since my wife's last winter alive. The first thing I noticed wasn't the truck. It was the silence. A white rental van squatted in my driveway like a stranger refusing to leave. Its tailgate gaped open, boxes stacked inside like soldiers ready for invasion. I stopped on the curb, heart tripping once, twice, before it steadied into disbelief. That was my house, my driveway, my peace. The front door stood half open, the faint thump of footsteps echoing inside. I stepped through and froze. Cardboard towers cluttered every wall. My living room, the same one I'd painted sage green myself 3 summers ago, looked ransacked. Furniture shoved aside, lamps misplaced, the faint smell of perfume where there shouldn't be any. 2 strangers ruled the space as if they'd signed a lease on my life. The man was my age but heavier, a gut pressing against a tucked-in polo shirt. His voice boomed with the false confidence of someone who'd never been told no. The woman beside him was all sharp angles and expensive scent, sorting through boxes marked fragile with none of the care the word deserved. Then I saw my son. Neil emerged from the hallway carrying a box labeled kitchen, sweat darkening his shirt. Behind him, his wife Cora brushed dust from her jeans, turning when she felt my stare. "Oh, you're back," she said. Like I'd been away for months instead of my morning walk. I kept my voice level. "Want to tell me what's happening here?" Cora's head tilted, the same little gesture that always preceded something I wouldn't like. "Dad didn't tell you? My parents sold their place. They just need somewhere to stay for a few months. We're all family. It'll be fine." Fine. That word had a way of meaning its opposite. Neil couldn't meet my eyes. "It was last minute, Dad. They needed help. I thought you'd understand. Understand that strangers were moving into my home without asking?" "It's our house too," Neil mumbled. The truth burned behind my teeth. I'd let them stay rent-free for 2 years, out of love. They'd mistaken kindness for ownership. The man in the polo dropped into my recliner. My chair, the one molded to my back after years of late-night reading. He grunted contentedly. "Comfy enough. Bit old, though. You might want to upgrade while we're here." I said nothing. He mistook my silence for permission. The woman, Rose, I later learned, was already rearranging my kitchen cabinets. The metallic click of dishes slapping shelves sounded like trespass. I spent the rest of the day retreating inch by inch. Every box they unpacked was a small act of conquest. That night, behind my closed bedroom door, I opened the safe in my closet. Inside lay the deed, one name only, mine. Paid in full, signed, sealed. Proof that this space, this sanctuary, belonged to me alone. Dinner was humiliation disguised as family. Clark, the intruding patriarch, complained about the thermostat being too warm, about the food being too plain. Rose sighed theatrically about the guest room being so cramped. Cora murmured comfort to her mother while my son sat silent. After the meal, I found him in the garage, pretending to fix something just to avoid my eyes. "Neil," I said quietly, "why didn't you ask me?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "It just happened fast. It's only for a few months." I wanted to tell him a house stops feeling like home the moment respect walks out the door. But I swallowed the words. That night, unable to sleep, I went to the kitchen for water. The cabinet had changed, my favorite mug, the one my late wife gave me, pushed to the back. In front stood Rose's flowery teacups like a conquering flag. I held that blue mug in the dark, tile cold beneath my feet, and felt something sharper than anger take root. Not fury, calculation. They thought my quiet meant weakness. They thought age had softened me. They were wrong. Tomorrow, I told myself I'd start paying attention, count every insult, every theft of space, every word said like I wasn't there. Because when people show you who they are, you document it. And when you have the right kind of patience, you make plans. The next morning, 3 words at breakfast would change everything. Words that turned invasion into war. "You should leave." The following morning, the The smell of coffee lured me into the kitchen before I'd even dressed. The air was thick with chatter and the sharp edge of entitlement. Clark sat at the table, already half through a plate of eggs, his posture that of a man far too comfortable in another's kingdom. Cora smiled tightly when I entered. Morning. We were just discussing something important. I could tell from the tension in Neil's shoulders that important meant trouble. She cleared her throat. So, we've been thinking about sleeping arrangements. 5 adults in a 3-bedroom house. It's not exactly ideal. I said nothing, just waited. Well, she continued, my parents need space for their things, and since you're retired, it might make sense if you took the couch for a bit. Or maybe a hotel. Just for a few weeks. The words were calm, rehearsed, but they hit with the force of a sledgehammer. You're asking me, I said slowly, to leave my own bedroom, in my house. Cora gave me that polite corporate smile, one that hides cruelty behind professionalism. It's not just your house, Dad. Neil lives here too. We're trying to make it work for everyone. Before I could answer, Clark's voice cut through like gravel. She's right. 5 people here is too much. Someone's gotta make room. Seems logical that it'd be you. I turned to him. Logical? You're the one without a job. You've got time. We've got responsibilities. Maybe take a little break. There's a decent motel down the road. He said it like he was offering a favor. Rose dabbed her lips with a napkin, pretending sympathy. Don't take it personally, dear. It's just, you've had this space all to yourself for so long. It's only fair to share. Fair, I repeated. That's an interesting word. I looked at Neil, my son, the one person who could have stopped this with a single sentence. He stared at his plate, fork scraping the ceramic in slow circles. Neil, I said, do you want me to leave? He hesitated. It's complicated. Maybe just for a while, until things settle. Complicated. That was his answer. I felt the air leave my lungs. Not from age, not from weakness, but from something that felt like betrayal. My son, the boy whose school lunches I packed, whose college tuition I helped cover, couldn't even meet my eyes. I stood. The chair screeched against the tile like a final punctuation mark. Rose sighed. No need to be dramatic. Families make sacrifices. Yes, I said quietly. They do. I left the kitchen, climbed the stairs, and closed my bedroom door with a calmness I didn't feel. For a long while I just stood there, taking in the familiar shapes, the dresser, the framed photo of my wife smiling from another life, the bed that had been ours. Then I reached for the suitcase in the closet. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I packed. 90 minutes later, I rolled my suitcase down the stairs. They were waiting. Clark slouched in my recliner, Rose perched like royalty on the couch, Cora frowning in feigned guilt, Neil hovering by the window pretending this wasn't happening. Oh, you're actually leaving, Cora said, as if she hadn't been the one to suggest it. You told me to leave, I said evenly. So I'm leaving. Dad, wait. Neil started, but the words came too late. We can talk about this. You had your chance, I said. You chose silence. The door shut behind me. Not slammed, just closed. A quiet ending to a loud betrayal. The motel I found wasn't much to look at. 2 stories of peeling beige paint and a flickering sign that read Sunset Stay. But when the clerk, a young woman named Maria, handed me the key to room 214, she smiled softly. It's quiet, she said. You look like someone who needs quiet. She wasn't wrong. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet, but it was mine. The silence was thick, healing, honest. I placed my suitcase by the bed and took a long breath. Then, almost without thinking, I pulled a box of documents from my luggage and spread them across the desk. Deed, property taxes, loan receipts, my entire history with that house laid out like evidence. I turned on my laptop and typed into the search bar. Homeowner writes Arizona guests versus tenants. Hours slipped by. The coffee grew cold. The sun sank below the blinds. What I learned changed everything. They weren't tenants. They were guests. Guests I could legally ask to leave with documentation, not emotion. I sat back, staring at the papers under the desk lamp's yellow glow. I wasn't powerless. I'd just been too polite to act. That night, I opened a notebook and began to write. Not a diary, not a rant. A plan. By morning, that plan had a title written in neat block letters at the top of the page. Eviction Strategy. Step 1 begins tomorrow. By the second morning at the motel, I'd built an entire command center out of one squeaky desk and a styrofoam cup of burnt coffee. The papers were spread like a crime scene. Deed, receipts, property tax statements. Each one proof that the house was mine and mine alone. 17 years of payments. 15 years of upkeep. 35 years of work in logistics had taught me that systems fail only when details are missed. I didn't miss details anymore. On the fourth day, while combing through my old emails, I found something I'd nearly forgotten. A 3-year-old message from Neil. Dad, it's a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back $1,000 a month starting next month. I remembered transferring that money, $35,000, so he could buy his car. He'd never repaid a cent. Not even an apology. I created a spreadsheet on the motel's sluggish computer. Each missed payment marked like a scar. 36 months. 36 failures. $35,000 gone. Each time I typed another zero, I could feel my anger cooling into purpose. This wasn't about rage anymore. This was logistics, a plan for justice disguised as patience. By the 5th day, I had notes stacked into neat folders labeled eviction process, legal rights, evidence log, and loan documentation. Every sheet was a step toward reclaiming what was mine. When the phone rang that evening, I almost ignored it. Mr. Brown? It's Patricia from next door, Mrs. Walker. Her voice carried both hesitation and concern. I thought you should know. Last night there were 8 cars parked on your lawn. Loud music, people shouting. It went on past midnight. I nearly called the police. 8 cars. My lawn. My home. I closed my eyes and let the anger simmer low and cold. Thank you, Patricia. You did the right thing. They weren't just living there, they were claiming it. Pretending I'd vanished. Rewriting my ownership like a story they could erase. The next morning, I called a law firm in Scottsdale I'd found online, Chun and Associates. A woman named Margaret answered. Her voice was calm, efficient, the kind that didn't waste words. I've read the statute, I told her. I own the property. They moved in without consent. I want them out legally. Come in tomorrow, she said. Bring documents. We'll handle the rest. The office was on the 2nd floor of a restored brick building. Sunlight cut through old windows, landing on polished desks and stacks of open law books. Margaret Chun looked up as I entered, half glasses perched low on her nose. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. I handed her my file, 40 pages of notes, each dated and numbered. She read in silence for 4 minutes, then looked up. You've done half my work already. Old habits, I said. I spent decades in logistics. I like clean systems. She opened a state statute on her screen. Mr. Brown, this is straightforward. You're the sole owner. Your guests, because that's what they are, not tenants, have no legal standing. You can revoke permission for them to stay. Legally, that's a 30-day notice. 30 days. Yes, you serve it, they have that time to vacate. If they don't, we file for a formal eviction. Clark and Rose Miller have no rights to the property. As for your son and daughter-in-law, it's more complicated, but you could apply the same process. I nodded. Then start with the Millers. They brought this rot into my home. She typed fast, words flowing like measured strikes on a drum. Within 15 minutes, she printed a document on heavy letterhead. Notice of revocation of guest permission. It looked official because it was sealed, notarized, legal. A quiet weapon wrapped in professionalism. As she handed it to me, Margaret's eyes softened just slightly. When you deliver this, do not argue. Do not justify. Just serve it or tape it to the door. Let the paper speak. They'll try to bait you. Don't respond. I nodded once. I've spent a week being baited. That ends now. That evening, back in my motel room, I laid the notice flat on the desk. The ink shimmered faintly under the lamplight. The notary seal glinted like a bullet casing. This was it, the shift from silence to action. The next morning, I'd step back into my home, not as a guest, but as the rightful owner. And this time I wouldn't be walking in alone. Because the next sunrise wasn't bringing peace. It was bringing the eviction. 8 days after they'd told me to get a hotel, I stood once again in my own driveway. The sun hung low and bright above the roofs of Saguaro Drive, the same neighborhood where I'd spent half my life. From the outside, my house looked unchanged. A fresh coat of beige paint, trimmed hedges, the same wind chime my late wife had loved tapping softly in the breeze. But I knew better. Inside, my home had been claimed. I checked my watch. 10:30 a.m. Neil and Cora were both at work. Clark and Rose usually took their daily morning walk at 9:30 and didn't return until near lunch. That gave me almost 2 hours. 2 hours to reclaim my life. My old house key slid into the lock, and for a moment I expected resistance, a betrayal of metal and tumblers. But the door opened easily. Amateurs. They hadn't even changed the locks. The living room was almost unrecognizable. My recliner, my refuge, had been moved near the window, facing the wrong direction. The antique lamp my mother had left me was gone entirely. The faint odor of cheap cigars hung in the air. Every step I took echoed differently, like the house itself was holding its breath. 20 minutes later, a white van pulled into the driveway. A man climbed out, tool belt heavy with metal. His shirt read, Pete's Security Solutions. "Morning," he said. "You Wilbert Brown?" I handed him the deed. "I want every lock in this house replaced. Front, back, side doors, and garage." He glanced at the paper, then nodded. "You're the sole owner since 2008. No co-signers." "Got it. Grade 1 deadbolts, commercial quality. No one's getting in without a key or breaking glass." "Good," I said. 6 copies of each. Pete worked quickly, the rhythmic click of tools sounding almost musical. I helped where I could, holding doors, testing handles. Each new lock slid into place with a satisfying metallic finality. When he was done, I signed his invoice, paid cash, and shook his hand. "Family situation?" he asked quietly. "Something like that." He nodded. "See it more than you'd think. Good luck, Mr. Brown." When his truck disappeared down the street, I stood in silence. For the first time in weeks, that silence belonged to me again. From my briefcase, I took the eviction notice, the one Margaret had drafted, and taped it to the front door at eye level. The bold header, "Legal Notice of Revocation," stood out like a warning flare. I snapped a photo for proof, timestamp clear in the corner. Then I began documenting everything. My kitchen. Cupboards rearranged, my dishes mixed with theirs. My bedroom. Strange floral sheets on the bed, Clark's clothes in my closet. My living room. Furniture shoved aside, their boxes where my wife's books once sat. Every photo was a piece of evidence. Every misplaced object a reminder. By noon, the house was quiet again. I made my coffee in my own kitchen, sat in my own recliner, and set the thermostat back to 72 degrees. The click of the air conditioner sounded like victory. At 5:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. The security camera, a new addition above the door, had detected motion. I opened the live feed. Cora's sedan pulled into the driveway. She got out, walked to the front door, and tried her key. Click. Nothing. She frowned, tried again, harder this time. Then she saw the paper taped to the door. Confusion flickered into anger. Seconds later, my phone rang. "Hello." Her voice came sharp and panicked. "What did you do?" "My key doesn't work." "I changed the locks," I said. "It's my house. You can't do this. We live here. You can't just." "There's a notice on the door. Read it. It explains everything. Your parents have 30 days to vacate." "My parents? What about us? What about Neil?" "Neil should have thought about that when he let you kick me out. This is insane. You're being cruel. We need our things. You can collect your belongings within the 30 days. All details are in the notice. All questions go to my attorney. Wilbert." I ended the call. 15 minutes later, Neil called. His tone was strained, broken in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. Dad, please, we can talk about this. You had a chance to talk at breakfast, I said. When she told me to leave, you said nothing. I was trying to keep the peace. Peace built on silence isn't peace, I said quietly. It's surrender. He didn't respond. At 6:04, the security camera caught Clark's truck pulling in. His face twisted from confusion to rage as he read the notice. Rose hovered behind him, mouth moving rapidly in complaint. Clark pulled out his phone, shouting something I couldn't hear. I didn't answer his call either. That night, I sat in my chair, coffee cooling beside me. Through the window, I could see four silhouettes standing in the dusk. Angry, confused, powerless. They had taken my space, my dignity, and my quiet. Now I'd taken it back. But what none of them knew, what even Neil didn't see coming, was that this was only the beginning. Because by the end of the month, I wouldn't just have my house back, I'd own their peace too. 6 days after the locks clicked shut behind me, an envelope arrived at the motel. Heavy paper, embossed seal, expensive stationery, pretending authority. It was from Davidson and Associates, the law firm representing Neil and Cora. The letter demanded that I rescind the eviction notice immediately, claiming my son had established residency and therefore held shared rights of occupancy. A bluff, but an expensive one. I scanned the letter and emailed it to Margaret with a short note. They're testing the fence. Her reply came 3 hours later. Subject line, as expected, no merit. The body of her message was short, clinical, devastating. Their claim has no legal standing. Neil is an adult child living rent-free. No lease, no rental history, no ownership. Guests cannot declare residency on paper they never signed. I read her words twice, then smiled. Legal language had never sounded so poetic. That evening, the motel room felt different. Not lonely, but strategic. The silence wasn't emptiness anymore. It was control. 2 days later, Cora appeared on my security camera feed in broad daylight. She stood on the porch, hand raised to knock, hesitation flickering across her face. For a long moment, she just stood there. Then she knocked 3 short, sharp taps. I opened the door but kept the screen locked. "Wilbert," she began, voice almost pleading. "Can we please talk like adults?" "We can," I said. "Right here." Her eyes darted toward the living room window. "Can I come inside? This is awkward." "You made me leave this house," I said evenly. "You can stand on the porch for 5 minutes." A shadow of irritation crossed her face, but she swallowed it. "Fine." She took a breath. "We hired a lawyer. He says Neil has rights, residency rights. You can't just evict us like strangers." I raised an eyebrow. "Your lawyer's mistaken. Mine's correct." "You can't just decide that," she said, her voice cracking. "There are laws." "Yes," I said, "and I'm following them." "Are you?" For the first time since I'd met her, Cora looked nervous. Her confidence cracked, the corporate polish slipping away. "My parents need more time," she blurted out. "They can't just go back to their PL." She stopped. The word hung in the air like smoke. I tilted my head. "Go back? I thought they sold their condo." Color drained from her face. They did. I mean, they need to find a new place." "That's not what you said," I replied quietly. "You said go back." Her silence confirmed what I already suspected. They hadn't sold the condo at all. They'd lied. Moved into my home rent-free to save their own money. "You lied to me," I said. "All of you. You're twisting my words," she said quickly, tears edging into her voice. "No," I said. "I'm finally hearing them clearly." She stepped forward, her tone softening. "Please, Wilbert, we're family. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It meant everything," I said. "That's why what you did hurt the way it did." Cora's composure broke completely. "We made a mistake. Can't you forgive that?" I looked at her through the mesh of the screen door, the faint barrier between 2 versions of my life. "You decided I wasn't needed. Now I've decided the same thing." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What do you want? What would make this right?" "Nothing," I said. "It already is." She stared at me for a long time, lips trembling, then turned and walked down the porch steps without another word. The car door slammed. Tires squealed. That night, my phone rang again. Her voice no longer pleading, but furious. "This is impossible," she shouted. "You can't evict us. You're destroying your family." "No," I said calmly. "I'm protecting my home. You're making my parents homeless." "They have a condo," I replied. "You lied about selling it. You're cruel." "I'm consistent," I said. "That's different." She screamed something I couldn't make out before the line went dead. I sat there for a long time afterward, staring at the dark window and my reflection in the glass. Behind me, the living room looked as it once did, familiar, peaceful, mine. When the phone buzzed again, it was Margaret. "They'll lash out now," she said. "Desperate people make noise. Let them. You just keep documenting. The law's already on your side." And I did. For the next 3 weeks, I monitored everything. Every phone call, every appearance, every word. Because revenge wasn't a single act. It was a series of quiet, lawful steps that led back to balance. And I was only halfway there. The next step wasn't about eviction anymore. It was about debt, old, forgotten, and about to cost Neil everything. By the time the dust of the eviction settled, I'd stopped feeling angry. Anger burns too fast. I preferred something slower, steadier, like gravity pulling everything back where it belonged. Margaret's final email arrived on a Tuesday morning. "Their attorney has withdrawn. The eviction stands. 30 days remain. 30 days until they were gone." But justice, I decided, wasn't just about space. It was about balance. The debt sat in my notebook like an unhealed wound. $35,000 loan to Neil Brown unpaid since May 2022. That line had waited 3 years for resolution. Now it would get it. By Friday, I was back in Margaret's office, the late afternoon light turning her blinds into striped shadows. She looked up from her computer as I placed the documents on her desk. "More evidence?" she asked. "More history," I said. "And a new case." She flipped through the printouts, email threads, bank transfers, notes in Neil's own words promising repayment. "You kept everything," she said, impressed. "Old habit," I said. "In logistics, the person with the paperwork always wins." Margaret smiled faintly. "Then let's make this official." The paperwork wasn't emotional, it was mechanical. Dates, dollar amounts, interest percentages. Precision that couldn't be argued with. Within an hour, the lawsuit existed, case number CV 2025 Z3847, filed with the Maricopa County Civil Court. Wilbert Brown versus Neil Brown, claim for unpaid loan. I watched as the clerk stamped each page. Thunk. A small sound with the weight of finality. 2 days later, the process server found Neil at his office in Tempe. Handed him the envelope in front of coworkers. Word spread faster than rumor ever should. That evening, my phone rang. His number. "Dad, please tell me this is a joke." "No joke," I said. "You borrowed money. You promised to repay it." "I was going to," he shouted. "You can't just sue your own son. You can when your son stops acting like one. You're destroying us, you know that? We're drowning already." "You told me to leave my home," I said evenly. "Now I'm just collecting what's mine. You started this." There was silence on the other end. Broken breathing, guilt trying to find words. Then the click of disconnection. 3 days later, Margaret and I sat together again, reviewing the evidence binder, organized, labeled, perfect. Bank transfer, email confirmation, text acknowledgement, 0 repayment, she recited. "This is airtight. His lawyer will tell him to settle." "He'll fight first," I said. She nodded. "Then he'll lose. And he'll remember that losing can be educational." The preliminary hearing came 2 weeks later. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and tension. Judge Martinez was a quiet man who disliked wasted time. Neil sat at the defendant's table, pale and tired. Cora didn't show. "Mr. Brown," the judge said, glancing at him, "did you receive $35,000 from your father?" Neil hesitated. "Yes, but..." And did you agree to repay it? $1,000 a month? It wasn't formal. It was family. The judge lifted a printed email. This says, and I quote, "Dad, this is a loan, not a gift. Would you call that formal enough?" Neil's shoulders fell. "Yes, Your Honor. And have you repaid any portion of this debt?" He didn't look up. "No." The judge nodded once, made a note, then spoke the words that landed like iron. Judgment entered in favor of the plaintiff for $42,035. The gavel struck. One sharp sound. Case closed. Afterward, Margaret leaned toward me. "They'll test the payment terms," she said. "Miss a month or two, hoping you'll forget." "I don't forget," I said. "No," she smiled faintly. "You don't." Within a week, the first payment agreement was signed. $1, $750 per month for 24 months. Failure meant wage garnishment, asset seizure, and public record. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Neil. "You really want to humiliate me like this?" I didn't reply. 3 days later, a deposit notification appeared on my phone. $1,750. Loan repayment, court ordered. The description itself felt poetic. I made coffee, sat in my recliner, and stared at that message. It wasn't satisfaction, it was confirmation. For the first time since February, I felt balance returning. They had turned my home into a battlefield. Now, every month, they'd pay rent to my silence. But some debts aren't measured in money, and soon they'd learn the cost of damage too. It was early May when justice found its rhythm. Neil's first payment had cleared, the eviction held firm, and my home had fallen back into the kind of silence I trusted. But silence has a way of revealing what eyes overlook. That afternoon, while watering the front lawn, my neighbor, Mrs. Walker, crossed over with hesitation written across her face. She held her coffee cup like a shield. "Wilbert, there's something I should have told you earlier," she began. I turned off the hose. "Go on." "My grandson. He was playing by the fence when those Miller people were staying here. He said he saw that man, Clark, dragging furniture. Hard. Heard something crash. The lady was cleaning up fast after. I felt my chest tighten. When? Second week they were here. I figured it was just moving noise. But after everything that's happened, I thought you should know." "Thank you, Patricia," I said. "You just told me exactly what I needed." After she left, I went inside and began a systematic inspection. Not surface cleaning, this was forensic. The dining room hit first. My wife's antique oak table, the one her grandmother had passed down, bore a deep gouge 6 inches long across the top. I ran my hand over it. The damage had split through the finish into the grain. In the living room, 3 black burn marks scarred the hardwood near the fireplace. Perfect circles, each about 2 inches wide. Cigarettes, probably. Clark's brand. In the master bath, the toilet hissed with a constant leak. Water bill, up $40 last month. The guest bathroom's faucet wobbled in its joint. Each discovery cooled me further. It wasn't rage anymore, it was evidence. The next morning, a man named Raymond Torres from Precision Property Assessments arrived. Clipboard, camera, laser measure, his movements clinical. "Document everything," I said. For 3 hours, he cataloged damage. When he finished, he looked up from the table. "This is significant. That gouge wasn't from normal use. Something heavy was dragged. Hardwood repair, $2, $800. Plumbing, $1,200. Tile work, $900. Antique replacement, $3,000. He handed me the report, neatly bound and signed. Total damage, $8,500. This is court-ready documentation. That night, I emailed the report to Margaret. Her reply came 20 minutes later. "I'll draft the demand letter tonight. Certified mail. Payment within 14 days or we proceed to small claims court." It was sent the next morning, bold, professional, merciless. 5 days later, Clark called. His number blinked across my phone. I answered. "You think you're clever, old man?" His voice was poison. "You're blackmailing us with fake damage claims." "I'm documenting damage," I said. You can pay voluntarily or explain it to a judge. You can't prove we did it. I can. I have before and after photos, timestamps, and a witness statement from next door. There was silence. Then a snarl. You won't see a cent, sue me if you want. I plan to, I said, and hung up. Before filing, I remembered something. In early February, just before all this began, I'd taken photos of every room for my insurance renewal. I opened my cloud storage and there they were. Pristine images of every surface, each file date verified. Proof that the house had been untouched before the Millers moved in. 3 weeks later, we stood in court again. Small claims this time. The room was smaller, the tension thicker. Judge Morrison presided. Her glasses low, her tone sharp. Clark represented himself. Couldn't afford another lawyer. Rose sat beside him, expression pale and hollow. Margaret presented our evidence. Pre-occupancy photos, post-damage photos, Raymond's professional assessment, Mrs. Walker's notarized statement. Clark's defense collapsed halfway through. Those scratches were there before, he insisted weakly. The judge tapped her pen. Do you have photos to prove that? We didn't think to take any. Mr. Brown did, she said. And his are dated and verified. He sputtered something about being elderly, about hardship. The judge's tone didn't soften. You damaged another person's property while staying there without permission. Judgment for the plaintiff, $8. 500 plus court costs. The gavel fell like punctuation on a prayer. Outside the courthouse, Margaret smiled faintly. That's 3 wins in a row. They'll have to liquidate something. They'll sell that truck, I said. She nodded. They won't risk a lien on the condo they lied about. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Walker confirmed it. Clark sold that old Silverado, she said over the fence. Saw a stranger drive it away yesterday. Looked like he hated every second of it. I believed it. That truck had been his pride. He'd parked it in my spot like a trophy. Now it was gone, sold to pay for the destruction he'd left behind. That night, I sat in the dining room, staring at the ruined table one last time before arranging to replace it. It hurt, yes, but beneath the hurt was something steady, almost serene. Justice didn't roar. It whispered. 3 lawsuits, 3 victories, eviction, debt, damages. Each one bringing back a piece of what they tried to steal: respect, control, peace. But peace, I was learning, has one final test. What happens when the guilty finally beg for forgiveness? The summer heat came early that year. The air above Saguaro Drive shimmered like a mirage, and my lawn, freshly trimmed, freshly mine, gleamed a sharp green under the sun. It had been 4 months since the last court date. The house was whole again. New table, polished floors, repaired plumbing. But peace never arrives without echoes. That afternoon, while replacing a light fixture on the porch, I saw a car pull up. A faded blue sedan I hadn't seen in months. Neil stepped out slowly, shoulders hunched, face thinner than I remembered. Behind him, Cora stayed seated, staring at her lap. I could have ignored him. I could have gone back inside, let the locks and silence answer for me. But something in his walk stopped me. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to surrender. Dad, he said, stopping halfway up the path. His voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd spent too long defending what he knew was wrong. Neil, I said quietly, you look tired. He gave a dry, bitter laugh. I am. Everything fell apart. After the lawsuits, after Mom's parents left town, Cora moved out 2 weeks ago. I didn't respond. The wind chime above us rang softly, almost mockingly. She blames me, he continued, says I should have fought harder. But she's the one who pushed this whole thing. He trailed off, rubbing his hands together like a man trying to erase guilt from his skin. I thought I was protecting her. I leaned against the porch rail. You protect people by standing beside them, not by betraying others for them. He nodded, eyes glassy. I know that now. The silence stretched. In it, the sound of cicadas rose and fell, like the heartbeat of a memory. I came to say I'm sorry, Neil said finally. Not for the lawsuits, not for losing, but for forgetting who you are. You didn't deserve what we did to you. It wasn't rehearsed. The words came raw, trembling. I lost the condo, he added. Clark and Rose signed it over to cover debts. They moved to Nevada last month. Haven't heard from them since. I watched him for a long time. The son who once helped me fix fences and change tires now stood hollow. His pride gone, replaced by the truth. Do you need money? I asked quietly. He shook his head. No. I just wanted to see the house again. Then look, I said. But don't expect it to feel like it used to. He stepped onto the porch, eyes drifting over the doorway. The repaired wood, the new locks gleaming under the sun. You fixed everything, he murmured. Not everything, I said. Some things stay broken, and that's all right. It's how we remember. He turned to face me, tears edging at the corner of his eyes. You hate me now, don't you? No, I said. I learned a long time ago that hate takes up too much room. I just stopped renting space to people who don't value it. He nodded slowly, the meaning sinking in. After a long silence, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. Last payment, he said. Early. I didn't want it to sit any longer. I took it not for the money, but for what it represented. A man finally closing the circle he broke. Thank you, I said. He stepped back, wiping his face with his sleeve. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear me say I'm sorry. Then he walked toward the car. Before getting in, he turned once more. You were right about peace, he said softly. It's not given, it's taken back. I watched as the car drove off, shrinking down the road until it became a blur against the light. Inside, the house felt quiet but not empty. The rooms no longer echoed with intrusion, they hummed with memory. I touched the doorframe as I passed through it, the way my wife once did. Later that night, I brewed coffee and sat by the window. Outside, the moonlight painted everything silver. The papers on the table, deed, judgments, letters, all neat, all done. Justice, I realized, isn't revenge. It's maintenance. It's mowing your lawn after a storm. It's tightening the screws no one else notices. It's reclaiming the spaces others forgot were yours. As I leaned back in my recliner, the same one Clark once claimed, I smiled faintly. The house was whole. The law had spoken. The story was finished. And for the first time in a long while, the silence felt like peace again. But sometimes, when the wind moves through the hallway just right, I still hear her voice. My wife's laughter, faint and distant. Maybe the house remembers her too. Or maybe it's remembering everything. For weeks after Neil's visit, the house lived in perfect rhythm again. The clock in the hallway ticked steady as a heartbeat. The refrigerator hummed. The air conditioning sighed softly through the vents. It was peace manufactured, measured, and mine. Every morning, I brewed 1 cup of black coffee, opened the curtains, and let the light flood the living room. I'd sit in my recliner, the same one Clark had claimed, and watch dust particles float through sunlight like tiny ghosts. I told myself I'd earned this silence. But silence, I learned, has weight. Too much of it, and even memory begins to echo. One night, I woke at 2:47 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. Slow, steady. Not the creak of the old wood settling, these had rhythm. Deliberate human rhythm. They came from the hallway, near the bedroom that used to belong to Neil. I sat up, heart calm but alert. For a moment, I thought maybe I dreamed it. Then, another sound. A soft thump, like something being set down. I switched on the bedside lamp. Hello. Nothing. I walked to the hallway, floor cool beneath my feet. The air smelled faintly of cedar and cleaning polish. Exactly as it should. But the light at the end of the hall flickered once before holding steady. The room was empty. The door stood half open as it always did. Still, a chill traced my spine. Something in the air that didn't belong. I checked the security camera feed, nothing. No movement, no shadows. I went back to bed, told myself it was just memory playing tricks. The next morning, I found something strange. The photo on the living room wall, the one of my wife smiling beside that old oak tree, was crooked. Just slightly. Not fallen, not damaged. tilted. I fixed it, pressing the frame against the nail until it leveled again. But when I stepped back, I noticed it. A faint outline in the dust below the frame, as if a hand had rested there. A small hand. That day, I didn't leave the house. I walked its rooms like a man inspecting history, touching doorknobs, running fingers over picture frames, listening. Everything was in place, yet something felt different. By evening, I sat outside on the porch, watching the streetlights blink on one by one. A soft wind moved through the chimes, the same tune my wife had chosen years ago. For a moment, it sounded like laughter. The next night, it happened again. Not footsteps this time, but the faint murmur of a voice. I couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm. The sound came from the dining room, from the direction of the repaired table. I stood there in the dark, listening. And then, nothing. The air grew still, heavy. Even the chime outside went quiet. When I turned on the light, everything was normal again. But on the table sat a cup. My old blue mug, the one my wife had given me years ago. I hadn't used it in months. I always kept it in the cabinet. Now it sat there, half full of cold coffee. I touched the mug. It was damp. That night, I left the light on. The following morning, I called Maria, the motel clerk who had given me the key to room 214 months ago. She'd always been kind, the kind of person who listened. "Back in your house for good?" she asked. "Mostly," I said. "But it feels different." "Different how?" "Like it's watching," I said before realizing how strange that sounded. She chuckled softly. "Maybe it's just memory. Old houses remember things. You know?" "Maybe," I said, though I wasn't sure if that comforted or unsettled me. That night, I stood at the doorway of the living room. Lights off, eyes adjusted to the dark. For a moment, I could swear I saw her, my wife, standing near the window, her shape faint, her hands folded the way she always did when she was about to say something. Then she was gone. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just whispered, "I fixed it all, you know? The house, the mess, everything." And in the silence that followed, the wind chime answered, one soft note, as if in approval. I didn't check the hallway that night. I didn't need to. Some debts, I realized, don't belong to the living. But the next morning, when I went to make coffee, there were 2 cups on the counter, both still warm. By the time June settled over the valley, the house had grown still again. Too still. Days passed in neat rows. Coffee at 6, porch reading at noon, lights out before 11. But even the air felt aware. Sometimes, I'd find tiny shifts, barely noticeable unless you lived alone long enough to know the weight of every object. A chair angled slightly off. A drawer open half an inch. The faint smell of my wife's lavender soap drifting down the hallway, though I'd boxed the last of it years ago. I kept telling myself, memory, not haunting. Yet each denial sounded less convincing than the last. One stormy evening, lightning crawled over the desert horizon like silver veins. I sat by the window, rain whispering against the glass. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. The house exhaled, every wall releasing years of breath. I reached for the flashlight and froze. Across the room, by the dining table, the outline of a figure shimmered faintly in the dark. Not sharp enough to terrify, but clear enough to recognize. She was standing exactly where my wife always did when waiting for dinner, one hand resting on the chair back, head tilted slightly. "Lydia," I whispered. The name hung there like an offering. A faint glow touched the table. Soft, blue, unreal. The antique clock ticked once, then stopped. I took a slow step forward. "If this is you, I did it. I made things right. The house is safe again." The air seemed to warm around me, then cool just as fast, like the brush of unseen fingertips. And then the whisper came, barely a sound, almost a thought. "You fixed the house, but what about you?" I turned toward the voice, but the room was empty. The glow was gone. Only the rain remained. The power returned a few minutes later. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I sat down, heart steady but unsettled, and noticed the blue mug on the table again. 2 of them now, both steaming. I didn't remember pouring either. Outside, thunder rolled low. The wind pressed gently against the windows, almost rhythmic. Something about that rhythm made me look toward the hallway. The shadows there moved, slow, deliberate, stretching long across the floor until they reached the edge of my recliner. Then stopped. I didn't move, didn't speak. For a moment, the house felt alive again, breathing around me, walls expanding, floors creaking like ribs. It wasn't threatening, just aware. I whispered, "If you're still here, you can rest. It's all over now." A soft chime answered from outside, the one she'd hung a decade ago. It rang once, twice, then fell silent mid-swing, frozen in the air though the wind still moved. That's when I understood. Some places aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by memories that refuse to leave quietly. A week later, I listed the house for sale. Not because I feared it, but because it deserved to start over the way I never quite could. Maria from the motel came to help me pack. She walked through each room, her eyes wide. "It feels peaceful here," she said softly. "Like it forgave itself." I smiled. Maybe it did. On my last night, I stood in the doorway, lights off, suitcase by my feet. The air was cool, still scented faintly of lavender. I whispered, "Thank you." Not sure who I was thanking. The house, Lydia, or the silence itself. As I closed the door, I heard it. One soft, deliberate knock from the inside. Not loud, just enough to let me know it was heard. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Some endings are acknowledgments, not farewells. Weeks later, the realtor called. "Funny thing," she said. "Every time someone tours the house, they say it feels warm, like it's alive. You sure you want to sell?" "I'm sure," I said. Some homes don't belong to people anymore. They belong to their stories. After the call, I sat in my small new apartment, surrounded by unopened boxes. The silence there was different, lighter, empty but not lonely. Still, every so often, when the wind moves through the vents just right, I catch the faint jingle of a chime that isn't there. And sometimes I pour 2 cups of coffee, out of habit, or maybe out of remembrance. Either way, one always stays warm longer than it should. They say walls can't talk, but I've learned they can listen. And somewhere on Elmwood Drive, one quiet house is still listening for me.